Good afternoon and hello, folks. My name is Rich Longo. I'm your host for today's presentation on ITIL simulations, improving IT, presented by Mike Victal of the Auslyn Group. Mike has quite a few credentials. He's been over 30 years in the IT service management space and is a co-author of newly released ITIL 4 publication, just came out this year, Direct, Plan, and Improve. Definitely something you might want to take a look at. He's ITIL V2 Service Manager. Let's say that again, ITIL V2 Service Manager, ITIL V3 Expert, and ITIL 4 Certified. He is certified instructor in all ITIL courses, as well as DevOps and Lean IT. Mike, we appreciate you taking time out today to share this presentation with us. And before we get started, let me introduce our organization here at Flycast Partners. Flycast Partners offers best-in-class implementation services and training in IT service management, IT asset management, IT operations management, enterprise service management, and workload automation spaces using ITIL best practices. Our professional services team has well over 5,600 professional services engagements on-site and remote. Most importantly, with the current pandemic, the remote part, we've been able to do that seamlessly for our customers. So please keep that in mind. As an organization, Flycast Partners has well over 1,200, yes, 1,200 regular customers all throughout Canada and the United States. I encourage you to reach out to us at 844-FLYCAST. That's 844-359-2278, or go visit our website. As you can see it, I had up earlier, we have a new site, and in the bottom right-hand corner of the site is a chat box. Those folks are standing by. Those ITIL IT experts are standing by for you Monday through Friday during normal business hours. So please take some time out to just say hi to them. They're able to answer questions, get you data sheets, white papers, demos, information on remote administration services, L1 support, whatever that need might be. Or you can simply email us at info@flycastpartners.com. Audience, I encourage you to ask a lot of questions today. Let's pick Mike's mind. Mike will be able to answer all the questions that you type in. I'll read them off to you. I'll read them off to the audience and to Mike, and he'll answer them live for you during this presentation as time will allow. Now, without further delay, we're going to go ahead and get this started. Mike, we'll go ahead and move to slide 1.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you, everybody. Rich, thank you so much for having us give us a presentation here in regards to an extremely exciting topic, talking about simulations. And simulations can be used in many different facets as verbiage anyway. Sometimes we call these simulations, but sometimes we call these experiential learnings and gamified learnings and such. So I appreciate the opportunity. And I'll go ahead and start off now by saying if there's any background noise, like maybe an airplane or something, I do apologize now. I'm in a hotel on travel, and you have to do what you have to do. So I apologize if anything in the background pops up here. But I do want to thank you all for attending the session here today. And it is about simulations and really enabling IT to be truly enabled into the business and integrated into the business. Now, how do we do this? Well, simulations is a major way of making this synergy or this relationship take place. And we'll talk about how we make that happen. Now, simulations themselves, they're not necessarily new. These are not new approaches to how we do things. What is new about the simulations nowadays is taking into consideration many different attributes that are associated to our day-to-day lives, and they've changed significantly. As Rich mentioned, we talked about ITIL 4 and being a co-author of one of the books of ITIL 4, the latest release of ITIL. We did this ITIL 4 release because there's been significant modifications in the marketplace. Things like cloud computing. When the previous release of ITIL was out, cloud was there. Cloud's been around a long time, but it's been modified in so many different facets that we had to take that in consideration. Practices like Agile or DevOps wasn't even around then. And then we take in Lean IT. So we need to take into consideration, as the organizations change, as the industry changes, how do we integrate this, and what does it look like? What is the value of bringing certain practices to face within the organization, and how do we as an IT organization align to that to enable the business to be more successful? So we talk about the aim of these simulations. They truly are giving us the ability to demonstrate these IT service management practices, whatever they may be. We're going to focus maybe a little bit more towards the ITIL practice, but it doesn't have to be ITIL. It could be many, many other different practices of choice, and then also homegrown practices and things like SDLC that may have been modified to your organization. And why do we do this? Well, the whole point here and the aim of what we're trying to do here is making sure we align this to the business needs. Now, as we go forward and we begin to leverage this and adopt these practices, it really does help us with the overarching curve of maturity. Now, when I say maturity, we talk about maturity of the organization. What does that consist of? The maturity of our tool adoption and integration, the maturity of our processes of the documentation, the policies, and the adoption of and the adherence to, the people, the education of that, not to mention the culture, of which every organization going down the path of rolling out service management practices or even tools, I might say, should have some sort of maturity assessment done, typically speaking externally, if not internally at the minimum level. But it's also to give us the experience. Now, experience is one thing we can do. We can experience a classroom setting. We can experience an experiential learning session like a simulation. We'll talk more about the experience side of this, and that is really the aim of what the simulations are all tasked to do. And that is to help us understand and experience the maturity curve, the alignment to the business, and how do we truly enable the business to be successful, not to mention overarching performance, end-to-end performance of what we do as an IT organization to the business services and the business processes as well. So we'll talk more about these as we go forward, okay? Let's go to the next slide. Yeah. So how are they used? Well, when you think about simulations, these simulations really can be used in many, many, many different facets. As you see here, a list of uses here within the simulations. But whether you have internal staff or external, partners, suppliers, customers that are part of maybe ASP type activities, this is a great way to get everybody on board about what is it we do as an IT organization. I have literally done this simulation, I think it's safe to say now, over 1,000 times in my career on basically every continent on the globe, maybe with the one extremely south of us on the bottom. But we've done them for many different reasons. That's why we've listed these here, is to kind of give an example of how they can be used, whether they be internal staff, external customers, or partners or suppliers or whoever they may be, from a cultural perspective, from a process perspective, more of a here's what we do to enable or how we make you successful, Mr. or Mrs. Customer, whoever they might be, right? We also do it from an educational perspective. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but also to help everybody understand what these service management processes and these best practices are. So if you want to do a simulation to say, we're really looking at ITIL as the de facto practice within our organization, but also we also have a very large development environment. We have agile development, Scrum, maybe DevOps, then we need to bring these together. Well, this is what the simulation is going to do for us from a practice perspective, not to mention how it's going to support a more successful implementation, but also more importantly, the adoption. We can implement whatever we want. The question is, are we going to adopt? Are we going to embrace these practices, also known as the ITSM culture, and the processes that are necessary for us to integrate these tool sets, these tools and technologies, if we're going to be bringing in the BMC technology and the suite of technologies they offer, or anybody else for that matter. The question is, are we in a position to handle that adoption, that embracing of those technologies? There's a difference of rolling out technologies and saying that's the new tool of choice going forward, and now we use it based upon the tool, than saying, how do we truly embrace this and make this a key enabler to us as an organization, and how can we provide higher quality, better performing, greater alignment across the organization, whether it comes down to a tool, or whether it comes down to the silos that we need to break down, and we'll talk about that in a second as well. But we also need to take into consideration, how can we work more closely with other teams in the organization? This is where I talk more about the us and them mentality of some organizations that I visit, which is typically outside of 2020, 40 to 60 customers a year around the globe, where we find the us and them mentality. I'd probably say the majority of organizations, where we as IT don't understand what the business needs are and the drivers are. And the business is kind of saying the same thing about IT, where IT doesn't really understand the needs of what we have as a business and why can't they enable us to be successful. We as an organization are becoming much more dependent upon IT as a strategic asset to our business delivery. And we as an IT have these value chains that we must create to enable the business to be more successful. They're also fantastic, which will support the previous bullets, fantastic as a team building exercise. One, because they're fun. These are really a lot of fun to have in the organization. They're exciting. And when folks go through the simulations, not only having fun, but they're truly experiencing the value of tools and technologies and the processes and the culture and the alignment to business. And we'll talk more about that, about who should be attending these in a second. But this can in fact be used solely as a team building exercise. We did it, rather long time ago for an organization in Holland. And we put 2,500 people through this simulation in a rather short period of time, simply as a team building exercise, because that's what the CIO wanted to do. It's a great, great team building exercise. We've also modified these simulations due to the pandemic. We are typically doing these simulations on site in person, but we have now modified the simulations to accommodate social distancing in a physical presence. And we'll also talk about the other approach that we can do for the simulation as well to handle that. So these can be used in a variety of different ways to help us all understand what we as an organization need to do to really align ourselves to the business needs, okay? So what is the value? That first bullet pretty much says it all. So the value delivery here is where everybody is getting a much better understanding of what happens when we break these silos down by getting it, whatever it may be, whatever that message may be that you wish to get out of the simulation, which is very accommodating to a tailored need for you, of which we would discuss with you and talk to you about what a simulation is, more so towards your organization. What are you wanting to get out of it? And everybody walks away with a much better understanding. They get the message. They get the need. They understand the value of cross-organizational collaboration. I always say we all get the aha moment, right? Which is, what does ITIL even look like? ITIL is an industry recognized practice, but there's certified courses in this. There's publications on this. But what does it look like? What does it look like when I walk down that tunnel and truly understand what can ITIL do to our organization to enhance our ability to be more effective, to be more efficient within the organization, and align ourselves to the organization, to the business needs. Okay. Also, increased buy-in. Right. This is where, whether they be at the C-suite level, which you'll see a couple bullets down, but the adoption, the greater buy-in. We've done these for many organizations where all it took was one half of one simulation to where CIOs stop us halfway through and they go, no, Mike, we get this. This is exactly what I'm trying to do within our entire organization. And from there, the rest is history. But later on down the road, they really do begin to change the way they do service management as a practice within the organization because they've adopted it. Now, when I talk about the compliance piece, if this is what is of concern for you, then we'd tailor the simulation to understand, well, if you're looking more towards compliance, if you're in the pharmaceutical space or the financial space, then yeah, we have to comply with certain things and regulations, whatever that might be. If you're in manufacturing, you have specific things we must comply to as well. So we can tailor that to accommodate that, right? We've talked about the implementation piece and also the cross-organization, but it also is the engagement and the envisioning of what CIOs or the CEOs or the CFOs or the C-suites are trying to achieve in the organization and vice versa, which is that relationship. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about the attendance of these here and who should be attending, but I think that's very important to make sure that they are all involved with this as well. Not to mention a better business understanding of what IT brings to the table. A better business understanding. In many cases, if I'm in IT, which I spent many of my years in my career in IT, from operations and batch job scheduling and changing tapes, I just gave away my age, and such, all the way up to managing the very department which I created with a very, very large computer manufacturing company and created their NOC and their data centers, and to understand the value that we bring to the table. But in many cases, we didn't understand what the business drivers were. We're doing it because that's the way we're told to do it, as opposed to understanding how does this enable the business to be successful? What happens if, for instance, as an IT service goes down, what does that mean to the business, right? And that's the impact. That's the impact of what we're doing to the business. We also have the impact, more cost-effective education. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to this next slide over here. And that is going to be the Kolb. Dr. Kolb came up with this whole experiential learning cycle approach. Now, keep in mind, the simulation, we didn't invent experiential learning, right? But what we did do is we brought to the table a means of organizations like yours to come in and leverage these simulations to have a much better understanding of what is it we're trying to achieve as an organization. So Dr. Kolb came up with this experiential learning cycle where we need to do whatever it is we need to do. Let's just do it. Something's already been done. We need to review this, and we need to kind of have a theoretical approach about what worked, what didn't work. What can we do to make it better as we go forward? Because if we don't learn from the past, well, I think you know the rest of that statement, right? We need to understand what is it we're trying to achieve, what has been done, what are we doing to make that happen? What do we need to do to improve upon that along the way and make sure that we're getting it done the most efficient, most effective way possible in the best interest of the business needs? And therefore, we'll draft and we will agree to a plan or a plan of attack to make what I always say, make the wrong right, or make what was not so good better, right? And that's where the simulation comes into play, is to make sure that we focus on what is the objective. Let's go forward and take these steps. And these steps are, let's do it. Let's review it. Let's theorize it and identify what needs to be done to make things better. Let's build a plan, and then we do it again. And it doesn't stop. ITIL talks a lot about continual improvement, continual service improvement. And that's what we do as an IT-based organization, but it should always be in the best interest of what? The needs of the business. And that's what we do as an IT organization. Okay?
What's the difference, though, between classroom material learning and simulation learning? That's a question that we have coming in.
Yeah, that's a really good question. When you think about classroom, now, we'll teach all the ITIL courses, the DevOps courses, the Lean courses. We'll teach all these. Whatever certification you want. And typically speaking, when we're in a classroom setting, now, obviously, the majority of all the education being done virtually, which also draws challenges. Where if we're in a classroom, we might be able to build a rapport, have eye-to-eye contact, draw on the board, right? As the students watch and observe, maybe have a couple breakout sessions here or there. If it's virtual, that it's even more of a challenge to draw on the board, maybe a breakout session or breakout room of sorts. However, that is still theoretical. And when we go through the simulations, you're not actually learning via a book or learning via a drawing that I might have on the board for you, maybe a process workflow or swim lane of sorts. You're learning by doing. You're learning by doing and being facilitated by somebody like myself to guide you down the path of what needs to be done. And then, as stated here with Cobb, we review this and then we theorize and identify what's working, what's not working. And we leave that to the class to discuss this. And then what are they doing by the end of the day? Some cases, they're actually solving their own issues within the organization in that one-day simulation. So learning by doing versus learning via theory, there's actually independent studies that talk about this, that they some even say go as far as you retain 38% more data by attending an experiential learning session than maybe a theoretical session or a book session, right? If anybody's ever read a book, I always kind of compare, they've read a book and then they make a movie out of it and you go watch the movie and you're highly disappointed with not the book, the movie, because you've already ingrained in your brain, the concepts of the plot or maybe visualization of your own and the such. This gets, I always say, your fingernails dirty with what it is. Okay, good question.
I can speak from experience from Flycast partners. During our last all hands, we did this as an entire organization. Those of you that aren't familiar, it is a requirement at Flycast for everyone to have some type of ITIL certification. We did this and we spent an afternoon going through one of these simulations, and I cannot tell you how much we all took away from that versus just going through the regular ITIL classes. So there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, good point, because that's the experiential piece of that, to where you do walk away, one, feeling good, and you had a good time. But I think the greater value is, outside of team building, is also a really good understanding of cross-organizational collaboration and what does it mean to the business and IT as we work closer together. So we also align this to balanced scorecards, right? So the industry out there has a flavor of balanced scorecards, right? So what we're trying to do here is, one, focus on the outcomes. I always say, let's keep the end in mind. What is the end? Well, the end is customer's experience, which is why we're doing things. Whatever it is you're doing, whatever vertical in the market you might be in, it is the customer in mind. Now, when I say customers, that could be partners, that could be suppliers, that could be citizens. And this is what we're focusing on. And so that is what one of the tenets associated to the simulations is making sure that what we're doing is maintaining high levels of customer satisfaction. Yes, very subjective, but we also back it up with kind of the screenshot you see here from one of the simulations, kind of demonstrating that, the customers say we are getting better, but what does that mean to the business as well? Are we seeing return customers? Are we seeing greater revenue, if that's our focus and our objectives, depending on what market you're in? Right, so we want to make sure we stay focused on the customer experience by enabling the business to be successful. Right, so how do we do that? Well, we're going to need technology. We're IT. We can't really do it without it. In many cases, legally, we can't do this without technology. So therefore, we need these products. But the question is, what about the products, and what products are going to align to the business needs to enable us to be more successful, to maintain high levels of customer satisfaction? Well, that's where these service management practices come into play. And with this, throughout the entire day, as an example, again, you see in the scorecard here, a snapshot on the screen, we align this from round over round over round, kind of going back to Dr. Cobb's experiential learning session. You would go off and do it, we'll review it, we theorize, we plan to make things better. Then what do? We do it again. On here, you see column 1, column 2, column 3, column up to 5. Right? That's kind of how we're exercising that particular model as well, and demonstrating that within a balanced scorecard. Very, very effective. It's not just getting in there and doing a couple of things and walking away for the day. We're demonstrating to you, and factually demonstrating to you, that we are improving, and here's the data to back that up. Okay. There we go. Okay. So it is about service management. So service management native, right? So native service management really is all about these three, I always call them pillars, right, of sorts, where we do in fact have people, process, and technology, and that is where service management, IT service management, kind of the roots of IT service management come from. But it's not just about technology. I know we're in IT for a reason. I'm a technologist. I love technology. Anything new, I'm going to go get it, right? But I've seen many organizations acquire technologies, and they might be multi-million-dollar acquisitions, only to get 15, 20, maybe even the 27% that the analysts say that on average they get out of these technologies, right? So with that, if we want to extend the capability of the technologies, we need to have processes in place. But processes and technology really are of little value if we don't have the right people, the right skill sets, the right culture to make sure we take full advantage of that technology via the processes and the policies, and the procedures, and work instructions. So service management really is about people, process, and technology. Matter of fact, if you're going to get a maturity assessment of sorts, these will more than likely be the three tenets they're going to be looking at as well, are the people aspects of the assessment, the technology aspects, and the process aspects. And we bring in another one called the cultural side, because if we don't have a culture that it's willing to adopt and embrace these three, then it's kind of a moot point going forward. Okay. All right. So again, the simulation here really does, in fact, if you are in fact a profit-based organization, then we do demonstrate this as we go forward for each one of the rounds. Bottom line, the first round of the simulation, which I think Rich can attest to, it's chaotic, right? It is very chaotic. Everybody's like walking away going, I don't know.
It is an understatement. It really is.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun. It's and by the end of the day, people are clapping, people are cheering, people are having a good time. But at the same time, they're seeing the fruits of their labor from the previous rounds, whether it be the previous 2 rounds, the previous 3 or 4 rounds, however we deliver the simulation for you. Plus, we collect all the data from this here, some of it being subjective from the audience, other it being factual from the simulation model itself. So we actually bring this to face so you can actually see your progress as you move forward from one round to the other. Right? Sometimes you see a really large percentage increase than other rounds. Right? But it's fun to watch this growth as we move forward. Okay. All right. So who should take in consideration simulations? Okay. So I think this is a build slide, Rich. There we go. The first bullet says it all, right? So any organization could and should strongly consider a simulation, right? As Rich said, they went off and they had to get certified, which is fantastic. It adds a lot of credibility to the organization to have staff being certified, gone through the official curriculum of something like ITIL or DevOps or whatever it might be. But then you get the experiential side. Now, we recommend anybody and everybody within the IT or other organizations. We've had HR in here, we've had sales in here, we've had a number of different teams within a single organization, or we've actually gone to manufacturing organizations where they brought their customers in. These providers that they have a large customer base as well, they bring them in to do the simulations with them. So they can team build, exercise, put face to name, which is always kind of nice to do. But you also give the ability to have them understand what it is we're trying to do for them, right? So whether you're in manufacturing, if you're in the public sector, for state, local, or fed, if you're in healthcare, finance, it doesn't matter. Any organization and any size organization up to a specific minimum number we need for the simulation to run could, and I always say should, at a minimum, consider taking the simulation. Why? We're all doing it, whatever it is. And I don't mean IT as infrastructure or technology. I mean the fact that we have something to go do and we need to work together. Nothing gets done in silos. Therefore, we must work collectively together. Okay. So real quick on these next types of simulations that we can do. And what we've actually done with these simulations is we've kind of made them, conform towards a specific audience, right? So if you are, let's just say in the retail space, which is probably the most widely used simulation we do for organizations to say, I don't want this specific one. I'd like to have someone that's more general so everybody understands the topic. Then the retail space would be for that organization. So we have a retail one where we bring in business-enabled services like transactional success of transactions for retail being completed through credit authorization type activities, security of the IT-enabled business services, warehouse management, continuity practices, as well to make sure that we're working and thinking holistically across the entire organization. So we have the retail one, by far the most widely used simulation that we've done globally, right? So this is a great one if you just don't know otherwise. Everybody understands retail, whether it be online or not. We understand we have to place an order, swipe a credit card authorization. They need to make sure that the inventory is there, make sure that the warehouse is running properly, make sure that we have support, make sure we have security, and these types of practices, which are all represented by the icons there that you see on the screen. Okay. And this one here is going to be more of a healthcare. So if you're in the healthcare space, which we've done numerous healthcare simulations, then we tailor this to where now we're talking the same language as that specific organization. If you're in healthcare, so if you are in healthcare, IT, to be honest with you, rarely thinks about patient tracking systems. IT rarely thinks about managing the laboratory. IT rarely thinks about maybe in ambulatory services or dispatch and types of things. Right? But IT does think about security. IT does think about application and application management. Well, if we think about security and application, R&D application management, well, that truly enables the previous bullets and more. So now we're talking the same language. And now IT is aligning themselves much closer to the needs of what we do as a healthcare-based organization. Okay, we'll talk about a couple more here. A not-for-profit, a little bit different than, say, retail. Retail talks about, hey, profit-based organizations. Well, if you're in the not-for-profit, then that's a different focus altogether. You're not really focused on, generating ROI or generating profit. You're not thinking like that, but you are thinking about service quality. We are thinking about making sure that our projects and our project management tasks are in fact being done on time and within budget. We are making sure that we focus on the financial aspects about the monies that are being spent on a said or given project, making sure we are complying with that as well, right? So not-for-profit's a different language or a different focus when you're thinking about state, local, fed, or other. We need to make sure we're talking the same language. So we have this for you as well. So it's just another type of offering for simulations more tailored to the particular audience in which we're delivering it to. And this last one kind of shows kind of the other simulations that we'd have. So if you're interested in DevOps, or if you're doing DevOps as a strategic enabling practice within the organization, then DevOps is a simulation that's fairly new. It's fairly new to the marketplace. I like it. That's very, very specific to DevOps. And if you're not familiar with DevOps, take those two words apart, and it is what it says it is. How do we take development environments and integrate them into and become, for the most part, one with the operational space, to where we are thinking across this fence, or they say this wall of confusion? Well, project management simulations as well. Instead of just going through a PMP class or a Prince class and being certified and say, I'm PMP certified or I'm Prince certified, let's go forth. Well, what about the simulation to align that to how does project management live within the organization? We have agile simulations along with cloud solutions, right? So cloud is different, right? It's not our stuff, it's somebody else's stuff. How do we manage our application? How do we manage a business through cloud services? And how do we as IT play a role in that? Because in many cases, IT has been disjointed from the cloud service offering because it's not their infrastructure, it's not their servers, it's not their networks, not their applications. So we need to make sure we're all working cohesively across the organization with this. So with that there, it kind of shows you, one, the different types of simulations that we have to offer that really can accommodate, I believe, every vertical in the market out there, right? Whatever vertical you might be. Also, the value add that these simulations bring to the table, as Rich alluded to, these are one, very, very engaging. And it drives home the message that maybe the C-suite is trying to drive through all hands meetings. Maybe the mid-tier management staff trying to drive what we do as an organization or a team within the organization. And driving that home to where me, Mike Vicdahl, as an individual contributor, can in fact understand how I play a role in the much bigger picture of how we as an IT organization enable the business to be successful. Okay. And Rich, with that, I think that kind of brings us to close there. I think we're on time, if I'm not mistaken. Hopefully we're not too far afterwards.
We are on time. We have a couple minutes, folks. If you have any questions, now's the time to ask. Please type those questions in and we'll get answers for you. Now, I do have the first question. It's a good one. How many students can attend a simulation at one time?
Yeah, that is a good question, because a lot of folks will say, hey, we have 75 people. We all want to do it at the same time. Difficult. We like to keep the simulations really capped out at about 20. We have certain roles that need to be played within the simulation. We have roles of, say, service desk. We have, say, roles of project manager, or we have, certain roles for, scrum masters and so on. So we have certain roles that have to be played. When you get too many people, it breaks that up. If you have not enough people, which is typically around 12, so we like to focus on around 12 to 20 is the optimal numbers that we have. That works out really, really well, regardless of the simulation that you wish to bring in the organization.
Okay, and another question. Due to COVID, is there a virtual version of the simulation?
Up until a couple months ago, the answer would have been a definite no that I would recommend. The reason why I say that is because virtual is very, very tough when you're thinking about team building, right? Typically, these are done face-to-face. However, I think we've done a really good job in bringing the virtual simulations, which really made a lot of the development teams of these simulation providers scramble rapidly this last year. It took 4 to 5 months before we realized what the future was looking like. So there really wasn't much of an option. So I think we now have a good solution for a virtual simulation, albeit everybody's independent and somewhere else. We do have rooms. We do have tasks. It is still more energized, and it's a different way of learning. So the concepts of non-theory based, I think, are very applicable, and they work here, and they actually solve that or kind of give a resolution to that. Personally, I always say, since we now have a social distancing capability now with these simulations where you can be safe with these simulations, it's hard to beat face-to-face, and I say that loosely.
And one more question, who should attend any one simulation in a single session? Now, I know when we did it, we had everybody from our receptionist on attend the simulation. I think it was beneficial for us all as a whole, but let's see what your answer is to this.
Well, I like that you bring the receptionist in there, Rich. That's good. That's an audience that I think would be very helpful. I always like to say a good mix of individuals. I've seen some folks where they bring in just the dev team. Well, dev works with many different teams that are out there. I always say, let's bring in a good blend across the organization, especially if you can get some senior management in here. And I always recommend that almost as more of a mandate as opposed to a recommendation. But if you can get senior management up to and including the C-suite into these simulations with the mid-tier management staff, with individual contributors, and going horizontal across the organization and picking a few from each one of these, I think it's a great way to go, because one, you build that rapport, you build that relationship as you're going forward that you normally wouldn't be doing otherwise in your day-to-day task or your operational task within the organization. So it does in fact build the team. Second, I think when you have upper management staff involved, it begins to demonstrate the commitment that the organization has with IT service manual practices by saying, I'm attending this with everybody. This is what my plan is, or our plan is. And our all hands meeting, yes, does in fact get translated from top to across the entire organization. And sometimes that gets skewed. I'm here to demonstrate that this is what we're trying to do. And then they show that that support and commitment as well. So I kind of say any and all across the board.
Awesome. This is great. And folks, if you have any additional comments or questions, please go ahead and get those to us. We're more than happy to get the answers for you as we run out of time today. I'm not seeing any other questions. Mike, thank you so much for doing this presentation for us. It's very informative. There's a couple things that you went over this time that I didn't pick up on the last time we did this. So I appreciate it.
Good. Thank you for the opportunity. I really do appreciate it.
Folks, if you have questions, by all means, reach out to us at 844-FLYCAST. That's 844-359-2278. Or you can chat with us live Monday through Friday during normal business hours. We have people standing by, waiting there just for you. They'll help you out with data sheets, white papers, any information or questions that you may have. Or you can email us at info@flycastpartners.com. With that being said, Mike, until the next time we meet, audience, stay safe out there.
Thank you. Likewise.